poverty in our communities is not only of clothes and those kinds of things. It was the poverty of the mind.
We have a right to expect a job, to provide food for our families, a roof over their head, clothes for their body, an opportunity to have our children educated. And with your help and with your support, we will have it in America. Thank you.
In the 1960s, America waged a war on poverty. Its ambitions were grand: to end poverty in the nation not through welfare, but by creating opportunity for those left out. It became one of the most controversial reform efforts in American history.
And we all believed that it was in no one's interest to have an underfed, undereducated, under everything population.
What did he eat for his breakfast this morning?
She ate gravy.
She ate gravy for breakfast.
And you have to think about the fact that you're in a grocery store market and you need to buy milk and juice for your kids, but you got to decide on one.
Never in the history of this country had you ever heard of a federal government saying to people in the community, you can have as much participation in this as you want, and you can change your own destiny.
To teach a young American to be dependent upon the federal government is to destroy that young man.
The war on poverty clearly was designed to be a confrontation between the so-called folks left out of capitalism and those who were profiting by the capitalist system.
The empowerment of the poor constituted a threat, or at least an imagined threat, on the part of those who already had political power or economic power.
Now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power.
As the poor began to demand more from America, the war on poverty had to compete with the war in Vietnam for national attention and government funds.
We can spend billions of dollars to save some kind of a democracy, I don't know what kind it is, in Vietnam. We must spend more to preserve real democracy here at home.
The anti-poverty program gives some money to some middle-class Negroes because they're not interested in the program. They're interested in creating a pimple's worth of middle class as a buffer between the powers that control and the people.
We did want to dismantle OEO, but we knew that the Congress wouldn't do it. So instead of just declaring one day that OEO was out of business, we resorted to all kinds of trick and artifice to try and strangle it.
What began with hope ended a decade later, leaving unresolved problems we still face today.
People are still poor. Slums are still here. Homeless are still here. They have no place to go. You want to tell me that you declared war on poverty? Maybe in another country you declared war on poverty, not in the United States.
The war on poverty has become known as a war we fought and lost. The debate over what really happened is as important today as it was then.
I know what poverty means to people. We are going to build a great society. Where every man and woman has a chance for fulfillment and prosperity and hope. This can be done.
On August 14, 1945, Japan surrendered to the United States. World War II was over. We entered this war with 1/3 of our nation in poverty. We came out the richest, most powerful nation on earth.
Everybody's down at the train station waiting on the families to come home, and everybody's so excited about it. The war was over, things was gonna be better, and That was the hope of everyone.
There was such an enormous sense of elation at what America had accomplished. And I think that sense filtered into people's lives, because I remember my parents saying there was just a sense of an unending future.
By 1955, American workers were producing more than half the world's goods. The dollar in their pockets was the strongest currency in the world. People began to imagine an America where poverty would no longer exist.
The 50s in the United States, I think, were a tremendous period of rapid industrial growth. I mean, people got wealthy in the 50s. A lot of people made a lot of money. Working people made a lot of money.
Economic growth helped lift 1 million families a year into middle-class security.
There was this huge shift, really a redistribution of income had taken place during the war, which gave a foundation for families after the war to go from what would have been working class, lower middle class status to really feeling part of the American dream, really for the first time.
In the summer of 1959, at the American National Exhibition in Moscow, Vice President Richard Nixon celebrated the achievements of America's economic system.
The United States, the world's largest capitalist country, has, from the standpoint of distribution of wealth, come closest to the ideal of prosperity for all in a classless society. I know you object, but I have the floor.
Prosperity made it easy to overlook the nearly 40 million Americans living in poverty. The very old and the very young, those without work, and millions with work who were not covered by Social Security or the minimum wage. Across the country, the very things that made America great, its efficiency, its competitiveness, its inventions, were causing some Americans to be left behind. In the 10-state mountain region of Appalachia, 1 in 3 families lived on less than $3,000 a year. One observer described Appalachia as America's own underdeveloped country.
Most of the folks live out in the hollows, way up the backs of the hills and little windy gravel roads. And you go up there and you'd find these little coal camps with little wooden shacks in rows and holes in the floor. The kids were all dressed in rags, going to school without shoes. It's astonishing. Total poverty. Unbelievable.
In Appalachia, many of the poor were old stock Americans, descendants of some of the nation's first settlers. For the first half of the 20th century, coal from Appalachia had fueled America's industrial engine.
The main industry in Kentucky at the time of my birth was coal mining. And I often heard my daddy say, either you work in the coal industry or you don't work. It's always been when things are going, you know, people are working hard and they're working overtime, and the talk at the end of the day is how many gons did you load today, and or a long, long time ago it would be how many carts did you load, or how many tons did you load, or how much rock did you have to pick out of the coal that you dug.
When demand for coal was strong, there had been steady work at good wages in the Appalachian coal fields. But in the late 1940s, demand for coal dropped as industry began to use cheaper fuels like oil and gas. To stay competitive, coal operators looked to automation.
What you have just seen is a Joy Continuous Miner mining coal in the Pittsburgh number 8 seam inside of the Ireland mine. The ripper head on this continuous miner is approximately 40 inches wide, and it extends out 18 inches into the seam of coal.
A lot of men were scared of this new modern equipment, so they would never learn it, you know. So when it come to these layoffs and things, so they didn't have any qualifications. So that's where a lot of people, a lot of coal miners lost their jobs. They were eliminated from the workforce.
It was the young people that was getting the jobs, and the older ones who was losing out. And so they would, if they didn't have a pension saved up or some savings, they just had to do the best they could.
It was the first time in my life that people around me wasn't working, you know, steady. People lost their homes. The coal camps were being torn down, so this put other people out of homes, of course. And, you know, times were pretty desperate.
Well, I couldn't work the equipment because I'm not familiar with it. You see, because it's the machines and the loaders and so is advanced, and another thing, I never was on a piece of machinery, you see. That make a difference.